Back to our top line story. U.S. Attorney General Sessions pulling the plug on an Obama-era guideline that let individual states call the shots on pot. Our next guest is a Canadian producer of medicinal marijuana. He says the move by the U.S. may actually be a good thing for Canada's industry. Joining us from London, Ontario is Keith Merker, Chief Financial Officer at Weed MD. Thanks for joining us, Keith.
Hi, Greg, and thank you for having me. Just as a small correction, I'm actually in London, Ontario today.
Oh, in London, Ontario. What did I say?
I thought you said Northern Ontario, so Southwestern, but
you know what? Better for you to be in the South. All right, let's jump right into it. The U.S. making these moves. We're not really all that surprised that the Trump administration would take this stance. You think it might be a benefit for Canadian producers. How's that?
So I guess the knee-jerk reaction on the market that we saw today was to sell. Seeing this as a negative data point and a negative piece of news, I guess it's understandable. But if you take it to the next level and you see this as, beyond the first impact of a negative piece of news, you can see that for well-financed, well-positioned Canadian companies operating in a federally legal jurisdiction such as Canada and successfully producing cannabis under some of the most strict regulations in the Canadian regime that's found anywhere in the world, I think that you can see that actually what is happening here is extending an advantage that we have in Canada. We have an advantage over those companies in the U.S. that can't get proper financing, that can't get banking for that matter. And here we are in a nice, cozy, although the weather outside might belie that, but a nice, cozy environment to be a cannabis company, and we're able to operate without any risk or uncertainty of federal crackdowns such as we're seeing in the States today.
We have heard some concerns that in terms of the Canadian marijuana industry that this isn't a big enough market. Bruce Linton at Canopy, actually before the end of the year, was telling me that they see opportunities growing outside of Canada. Does this put a bit of a damper on that kind of view because that opportunity might not be in the United States?
I would respectfully disagree that it puts any damper on that view. I think Bruce Linton has made it clear that they have no intention of going into federally illegal jurisdictions such as the U.S., and Weed MD is no different. We take a very similar position. But globally, what we're seeing is the U.S. is being left behind. We're seeing Australia come online. We're seeing country after country come online in Europe, in South America, and all kinds of other jurisdictions where we're happy and able to do business on a legal level here as Canadian companies.
Is there a line to be drawn here in terms of what we're talking about in the United States? Because I don't know if we're very clear yet. Obviously, the Trump administration, Mr. Sessions, they're not crazy about recreational marijuana, but is there still some question marks and a bit of a cloud over medical marijuana and whether they really object to that?
Yeah, I think there are lots of question marks. I think that the, distinguishing, between what the Cole memo provided for in the U.S. is something that's provided a lot of confusion as well in the marketplace. I mean, this was just a memo. This is not the rule of law. This is just a memorandum which outlines the priorities of the federal government and attorneys general in the United States. It was never a solid foundation for building an industry. This was, obviously, as we're seeing today, a memo that could be extinguished with the stroke of a pen. And so it never really did provide a solid footing for anyone operating in the United States. Whereas here in Canada, again, we have a very solid footing to operate on. We're well capitalized, and there is a whole world out there of like-minded and like-regulated countries with which we can do business.
Now, the stocks in the medical marijuana space, including yours, get pulled around quite a bit on headlines. As CFO, do you try not to pay attention to the day-to-day action? Because it can be pretty wild swings from day to day.
It certainly can. I mean, this industry is never short for new, exciting, and volatile news events. Today being another example of that. You do try and extinguish the noise from the material, but that being said, it is important to understand what's going on in the marketplace, the way people are thinking, the way investors are thinking, and help to formulate your long-term strategy, because together all of these small data points we see, eventually do formulate a bigger picture, and it's important to understand all that.
Now, Keith, when it comes to the legalization of recreational marijuana in this country, before the year was out last year, the Prime Minister said, I never said July 1st, I just said the summer. What's your feeling as to when that legislation will actually be in place?
Well, hey, we're all hoping for July 1. I think it's nice to have a benchmark like that. I think it's a nice date, being Canada Day, to actually roll this thing out. However, I'm here for the long term. This industry is going to be here for the long term. So if it's July 1, August 1, even July next year, I don't think that's going to be the case. But nevertheless, I don't see that being any huge issue. We still have a medical market here that's growing by leaps and bounds. We again have these international opportunities that are in front of us. If the rec market here in Canada is delayed by a month or even more, I'm not going to lose sleep at night. I know that it's coming. I know things are being done well, and everyone's doing their best to roll this thing out on time.
All right, Keith, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate it.
All right, that was Keith Merker, Chief Financial